Even as the dean of one of the largest journalism programs in the country, I have no idea what the media landscape is going to look like 20 years from now. But our students are going to create it.
We are surrounded by content. Content shapes who we follow, how we lead, what we buy, and even what we believe. Welcome to the Content Generation Podcast, a class intercom production where we focus on the stories that come to life in schools all over the world. We highlight the students, educators, and communities who share the content that shapes our future. Welcome back to the Content Generation Podcast. I am excited about this episode in particular because we are interviewing Shari Veil, who is the professor, but also she is the dean of the College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And she brought the fire for this one, not just to talk about what she's doing with students now, but I think in her way of preparing students now for what is going to be the jobs of the future in journalism, be still my heart, right? Like the things happening in journalism is so important. And Jill, I know that that really triggers you too in what's possible as a former English teacher too.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing about, as you were rattling off Shari's title, it's kind of a mouthful, but she's every bit of that and more. She's just really an impressive individual. And I think we're really fortunate to have her at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and guiding young people into a whole wide new world of journalism.
Well, so many really interesting tidbits from Shari, but also things that I know, Jill, you're talking about, things like how we're equipping students, how we're preparing them not just for the job now, but for the job that it could be that we haven't even imagined down the road. And so content's a huge part of that. The other thing that's really fun about Shari that we did talk a little bit about is that she has her doctorate in crisis communication. And, as we talk about hot comms and all of the challenges that school PR faces, she's right at the epicenter of that, not just at her school, but helping educate a lot of other professionals as well.
Yeah, for sure. We never would have thought about that 30 years ago, that was something we needed to be trained in. But now you do. If you're any type of school leader, you need to be well-versed in crisis comms. And so I'm glad it's part of instruction that communication majors are getting. And I am a poster child for training people for jobs that do not exist. Because when I graduated from high school, when I graduated from college, we were barely, brushing up to the internet. And so it's just crazy when we think about that. But we want our young people to be prepared the best they can for the unknown. And that can be really scary, but it can also be really exciting when they're well prepared.
Well, I think you're going to be really excited to listen to Shari's comments. She's got a lot of insight, a lot of background, and what she's doing at the college is really inspiring. And it's inspiring to a lot of school communicators and certainly some students across the country as well. With that, let's listen to Shari. Well, welcome back to the Content Generation Podcast. We have a special guest today coming to us from the UNL School of Journalism. Shari, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Well, I've known you for a few years as you've taken over that role, and it is a really special school. And I thought it'd be really fun to see a little plug for UNL School of Journalism. Like, what do you do there? What makes it different than maybe a different school on a college campus?
Yeah, so we're the College of Journalism and Mass Communications. We have majors in broadcasting, journalism, sports media and communication, and advertising and public relations. What makes us different is a mantra that was established before I got here, and we've just put it on steroids over the last couple of years, but it is the concept of do from day one. It is hands-on, experiential learning. As we launched our strategic plan in 2021, it was creating essentially a practicum program. So now every student in our college spends at least 5 hours a week for at least 3 semesters of their time here in one of our media outlets or agencies. So they are doing hands-on work from the very beginning.
Cool. So you've got, a lot of hands-on. I've taken a tour. We've worked with schools. We've hired students from the college, and it's a really fantastic experience. But we're going to get to more of that. But I'd love to understand a little bit of how you came into this role of leading a college like this. Like, what does that look like? Like, what was your background to get you here?
Yeah, so my background was actually in public relations. So I came up from the other side of the house, as you would for a typical J school. Undergrad was in public relations. I started working full time the summer after my freshman year. So I worked for a bank, a mortgage company, a real estate firm, a hockey team, a hospital, a state pharmaceutical association. So kind of a wide variety of different areas when I was coming up and getting my undergrad, got my MBA along the way. And then once I had my master's, I could teach, and I thought that would be fun. And I started teaching, and as long as I was teaching, I could take classes for free. And essentially, I started my PhD as a hobby while I was still working full time. And it was a crazy schedule. I would get up, I would teach a class at 8 a.m., and then I would go to the office, and then I would leave at lunch, and I would go and take a class, and then I would come back to the office, and then I would go and take a class in the evening. So that's how I went through my PhD. So I wrapped that up, and I can tell you specifically, there was a moment of going to my advisor's office and saying, it's crazy. I leave the office. And at the time, I was the director of marketing services for a real estate firm that had about 120 agents. And I said, I leave the office and I'm just exhausted. But I leave the classroom and I've got all this energy and I'm so excited about everything that's going on. And my advisor said, some careers are life-giving and some are life-taking. Which do you want? And for me, that was enough. So I doubled up on my classes. I finished my PhD, and I made the leap to academia. So my first stop was at the University of Oklahoma. I was there for 4 years. My specific research area is risk and crisis communication. So I worked with the National Weather Center. I worked on our continuity of government plan for the state of Oklahoma, worked with public health, did training for Army captains before they'd be sent off to Iraq and Afghanistan, and how to work with a journalist who's embedded with them. So just really exciting, interesting work. And then I was recruited to Kentucky to essentially do the same thing, to start a research center there. There I worked with the Bluegrass Army Depot on our chemical weapons stockpile, a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security, all the while teaching classes in risk and crisis communication. And then I got sucked into student crises, became director of advising and student success, associate dean for undergraduate affairs, department chair. And then eventually you get tired of trying to fix things without the budgetary oversight to actually fix them. And I went for the dean position here, and this was the only dean position that I applied to. Wow.
Well, we're fortunate to have you here in town. And it's been great to watch the transitions at the school too. I want to talk a little bit, because we've got a lot of people who understand hot comms, right? Like they've been in the fire of it and they're living it every day. And you've taught it, you've lived it. What advice do you have in that space? Like, what's that felt like? And I should say, do you miss it?
Believe me, as the dean of a college of R1 university, you live it still. No, I really don't miss working in risk and crisis communication, because I still do it. There are challenges that you face as an educator. We certainly have, of course, we have student deaths that occur, whether it's by accident or suicide, which is sadly more common than we'd like to think. So how do you deal with that? How do you communicate around that? And for me, the best advice I can give you is to lean into your values. When I'm doing training around risk and crisis communication, that is my focus. So you focus on the inherent value of an individual and what they need. And you think about, what do they need to hear? What do the families need to hear? and what is within your power to be able to make a difference. And that just keeping that in the back of your mind can make all the difference. If you put the person first, everything else can fall into place. If you are focused on your reputation first, you have already lost.
That's a great thought. So as you've studied crisis communication and lived it, I think of the Weather Service being one of those. There's nothing more unpredictable, right? And it's one of the things that we live in school communications, is that there's an unpredictable nature of it, yet we somehow try to create a content calendar, right, out of the midst of that. Explain how you think about that unpredictable nature of school comms.
Sure. So especially when we're talking about, weather, yes, it's unpredictable, but we know what could happen, right? We can go through the scenario of what a major snowstorm looks like. We can go through the scenario of a tornado. While we can't say with 100% accuracy when exactly we need to communicate, we can get a pretty good idea of what we need to communicate when it happens, which again, what is that message of instruction? What can people do to protect themselves physically? Where is that message of adjustment? So how can individuals psychologically cope with what they're dealing with here? And then you come in with the reputation side of it, where you're focused on how do you instill trust in the organization that you work for, school, whether it's a school system or your individual school that you're working through. How do you establish trust so that they come back to you for information and that you become the primary source? And you are not going to become the primary source if the first time you are communicating is in that disaster scenario. So it is building up that trust beforehand, letting folks know exactly where the message is going to be coming out, where they can find it. And then when something does happen, it better be there, because that's going to reinforce the trust that they know that they can go back to your social media feed or to your website, wherever you are going to share that information. You need to tell them exactly where it's going to be. And when something goes down, it better be there. And you can't delay. You can't wait. When it's time for that message to go out, it has to be there and available where you said it would be.
Yeah, I love that dependability in trust, right? So you've said this, you're going to demonstrate it. That precision. I interviewed a school PR person a couple months ago, Heidi, who happens to be head of the National School PR Association this year, and she has a military background, and we talked a little bit about the precision in military. And you worked alongside of military deployments. What did that look like for school communication? What did you learn in that role?
I'm still involved in it, actually. Interesting enough. So back at Oklahoma, it was working with soldiers on how do you work with the journalist that's embedded with you. And what I learned was that the trust in the media was very low, very low for our armed services. And there was constantly a feeling that the media was just out to get them, out to make them look bad. And it's really just having a reality check that they have to understand that they have zero control over what ultimately gets printed or published or put on air. They have 100% control over what comes out of their mouth. And the only way that they're going to get good at that is if they practice, if they build up that trust so that they become a trusted source that media will come back to. So part of it was really just helping them go through. So precision comes from doing those scenarios over and over and over again. It is practicing. And that means that you have to practice on things that you don't want to do, which includes talking to the media in some cases, for at least these captains who had no interest in being part of that. But they did recognize the importance of letting the American public into the armed services and understanding that the media is the conduit to doing that. So when you look at it as who is your broader audience, that helped a great deal. The work that I've been doing recently, and we actually just had some sailors here in Anderson Hall where we were doing media training with them. So some sailors, we worked with the Big Red Sub Club that supports the USS Nebraska. So they had sailors who were here around Military Appreciation Day, and we did some media training for them. And then I actually teach a class that's on military public affairs. And this, so it's typically ROTC cadets, and it's just a short 1-credit pop-up class. So last time I taught it, it was 2 Saturdays, and that was the whole class. And I brought in public information officers from different branches of the military. Well, this spring, I'll actually be teaching it in Brussels over spring break. So we are doing military public affairs and global governments. And I've got about 20 students. We actually have an information session this afternoon, which is why it's top of mind. But we have confirmed meetings already set up. We're going to the EU Council. We're going to NATO. We're going to take out a train out to Mons to go to the supreme headquarters of Allied Powers Europe. We're going to the U.S. Embassy to the European Union, the U.S. Embassy to Belgium. We'll have a very fast-paced week, but nothing like a crash course in understanding military relations, where it is part of the culture of the city of Brussels as well.
Well, that's wonderful. I think I can come up with a strong lineup of people who would join you on that delegation. That sounds fantastic. So as you're bringing the Navy together in the most landlocked state in the country, and you're connected with some conferences in Europe, you're sort of like breaking out communication around the world as we think of what the next generation really needs to learn for public communication. Like what's changing? Like what do they need to learn?
How fragmented our media landscape is. I think that is the biggest challenge that we face, is particularly when we are working with military, when we are working around safety and communicating about risks, communicating about weather risks, all of this. You need to be able to reach as many people as possible. And there is no longer mass communication.
So you're
those publics.
So you would say that there's no longer any mass communication.
I'm afraid I do not. No, I will say straight out, no, there is not a set mass communication, because what used to be broadcast television, what used to be radio, now you can do streaming service for all of those different options. We can find our way to the news in so many different channels. We have our student population. We have students who are running our newscast, which we have Nebraska Nightly is running right now. We're actually prepping for a session, and many of those students who came on had never watched the evening news. So the first time they're learning about the evening news is when they are on the newscast. So now suddenly they're watching the evening news. So, I mean, it's just, there's a generational change that's coming in, and there's that fragmented media. It used to be everyone sits around to watch, CBS News, Walter Cronkite, what we think of as mass media. It's just not there anymore. So it's needing to understand all those fragmented media connection points to different audiences, and to be able to reach, particularly right now when you're trying to reach across political aisles as well, when media has become bifurcated in so many ways, not just traditional media, but of course our cable as well as social media. It's a hard task to be able to reach into those different areas. And when you're fighting against bad actors who are purposefully putting misinformation out as well, you're fighting not to tell the truth, but to point out something else as false. And that's a different place than we've been in before.
So in an era of miscommunication, discommunication, like how are you educating students and how to handle those roles?
Yeah, so we actually have we'll have a class here this next semester as well, bringing in AI into the mix. So how do you spot a bot to know what messages are being perpetrated by those bad actors? Also looking at how it's shared, being able to source information. We're talking a lot on the journalism side of how do you source your story, so that if there is a question about the viability of your story, can you go back and prove exactly how it came to be, who you interviewed, when you interviewed them? I mean, it's so much about building up evidence for your story, to be able to show that we are, part of our mission is ethical pursuit of truth to uphold democracy. We have to stand by that day and night, and we have to be able to extend that ethical pursuit of truth in pointing out falsehoods.
We've talked about this a little bit, and I even in touring the school, like we talked a little bit about how a lot of the traditional careers in journalism are not necessarily the careers that are available today. And as you're pursuing democracy, it's essential, right? It's essential that we have ethical journalism happening. How are we introducing this opportunity, and how are we helping that pathway?
Well, we're introducing it from the very beginning. So that's part of it, that hands-on experiential piece. We also have a great partnership with the Nebraska High School Press Association. So we start early, and we do workshops here at the school, as well as we go out to high schools and do workshops in the high schools across Nebraska. We even do some middle school workshops on how to tell a story, how to find a source for information, how to tell whether or not something has been altered by AI. So we run all of these different workshops throughout. So not just in our classes, which we do, of course, all the time, but also in our recruiting, so that we are bringing folks to the college who are interested in following that same mission of maintaining those values that we have set for our college. I think one of the other pieces of it is that we are giving them the opportunity to really explore different types of communication, different types of journalism. And making sure that they understand that there's a clear difference between investigative reporting, beat reporting, and advocacy journalism. Right? So you can be a really good journalist who is working for a nonprofit, a think tank that has a clear mission, but that is not the same as an investigative journalist who doesn't matter the outcome of this story. This is the fact and what we are finding. Not that those folks who are doing advocacy journalism are making anything up. They are looking at it from a very specific mission. And there is a big difference between those two things. And it's making sure that our students understand that well before they get out into the field.
Yeah, they're very different perspectives. And the channels, as you mentioned earlier, are dramatically different. Obviously, one of the esteemed alums coming from the late night TV has been great. The Johnny Carson's theater is just down the street from you. But as we think about mass journalism shifting, changing, not being in existence anymore, I guess you declared it dead. So we'll take that. But what's next? Is it all going to be over YouTube? What does it look like?
I don't think so. Clarification. I don't think traditional media is dead. I think the idea that we can reach all audiences through one medium is not realistic. And honestly, it never has been, right? So we have audiences who are not watching the same stations as us, listening to the same stations, reading the same newspapers. The idea that we could reach so many people, whether or not they're really reading the information, how they're watching it, how many are doing second screen, it's very, very different. So I think part of it is just understanding that, embracing it, and really learning a little bit of a lesson from the other side of the house, the advertising PR side of the house, which is, who is your audience? How do you reach your audience? And how do you reach multiple audiences, particularly with messages around safety and security to address risks, and to frame it in a way that meets their shared values with people who might be from a different background, different side of the aisle, whatever it would be? How do you have that same message cut across, and to make sure that you understand how you can reach their audiences? So it's embracing our segmented media and understanding that you have to use multiple channels to reach your audiences, because the idea that there is only one general audience is also something we've kind of been kidding ourselves about for a long time.
Yeah. That's I like that perspective. One of the other things that you do a lot of, and I know it because I've watched you do it, is you're also recruiting, and you have students to recruit. You have private-public partnerships. You have all those sorts of things. Many of our school PR friends have to be responsible for a lot of that, especially enrollment. What's your advice on enrollment?
For us, we've been in a very interesting situation in that we are a growing college on a campus with a shrinking budget, right? There's some reality there. We welcomed in our largest freshman class in the history of the college, which is 125 years old. So that's a long time that we've had journalism here to have that many students coming in. So part of it is evolving with our media landscape, looking for where students are interested in going next, recognizing that there are opportunities for cross education in these different areas, and that we have to prepare our students to be nimble and to be able to pivot as the media landscape changes as well. So for the first time, we have over a third of our students who double major within the college. So we have students who come in who are studying journalism, but they're also going to get a second major in ad PR with a special emphasis in public relations, because they might go out and work in journalism and then they may make a shift to public relations one day, or the other way around. Same thing, sports media and communication, which is by far our fastest growing major. We started that in 2017 and we already have 380 students in that major. So they're coming in sports media, which is a very specified, very popular field right now, but there are two different areas. So sports broadcasting, which is what really brings them in, is not where the jobs necessarily are. The jobs are on the sports promotion side, which is more of the advertising public relations side of the house. So we actually just hired a new faculty member. We're doing another hiring this year, specifically in the area of sports promotion. So looking at sports marketing, in-game promotions, ticket sales, all of the event management that comes into it. So that requires a little bit of cross-education from the typical just understanding how do we communicate about sports versus how do you do promotion and sales. How do you build that in? Media production is one of our high demand areas right now coming out of COVID. The need to be able to produce media, produce videos, be able to share them out widely is a high demand area, but it's high demand for MMJs, multimedia journalists, as well as folks who are working in corporate communication, who would be working for agencies, who would be working on sports teams. So I would say one of the big changes too is that we no longer have departments in our college. We have majors, but our faculty teach across all four of those areas.
So how do you separate out the message between a prospective student and the prospective parents? Because it feels as though parents are becoming more involved than perhaps I was in my generation.
Yeah, it's looking at where our students land. I mean, and that's a pretty smooth process. So when there is a concern of, okay, you're going to get a job in sports, where are you going to get a job in sports? And then we can point to our alums who are, leading Huddle and leading Open Doors, right? So what is new in sports is where our alums have landed. They're also going to ESPN. We actually had a student who graduated in the spring, went straight to ESPN. Those opportunities are still there. And even straight out of college, others take another round through it. I was meeting with a student this morning who works for a hockey team down in Dallas. I mean, there are all sorts of opportunities there. It's just finding the right pathway. And one thing I would make clear for those who are thinking, well, journalism, is it going to happen? Journalism hasn't gone anywhere. We still need good, ethical journalists out there. And they are still, if you look at how what has grown in nonprofit journalism, how that has grown, great partnership that we have with Flatwater Free Press, as well as with the Examiner. And fun piece of that is that started when I came. So not because of me, but since I've been here, we've been able to build those relationships from the beginning so that we've had students who have published pieces in there. We've had pieces that we started in a class that then got turned over in order to be produced by them, by Flatwater Free Press. We're doing one actually. We're working closely with Nebraska Public Media, in particular their Midwest News Bureau, with NPR, and our depth reporting project we're working on right now on the Nebraska prison system. So it's our students working on projects that will be published in these major publications in the area and regionally. I mean, that's an opportunity that students have now as a student in the college.
I love the work you're doing, and you are absolutely right. Journalism is here to stay, and it's growing, it's thriving, but it looks fundamentally different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just being open to that, understanding that even as the dean of one of the largest journalism programs in the country, I have no idea what the media landscape is going to look like 20 years from now. But our students are going to create it. And what we need to do is put those tools in their hand, let them experiment, play, fail fabulously, and fall in
ethically fail
yes. While they're in the college and learn from it. We had 80 students here in Anderson Hall on election night. We were the largest news team in the state. We had students who were at each of the party headquarters getting ready for who is going to be making their victory speeches at the end of the night. We had students taking photos at the polls, doing interviews out in the community. We had live cut-ins of the news for the newscast that started early in the evening that went all the way until 11:30. I mean, they were here when I left at midnight. There were still students and a couple faculty here finishing up, going over some stories. I mean,
that's fantastic, inspiring. When we talk about the content generation, that's what we're thinking about. That is the next generation.
And just incredible to see the excitement of students who thought, I have no interest in politics whatsoever. There's a difference between being interested in politics and covering an election. It is just, I still remember covering elections when I was in college. There's nothing that compares to that energy. And for students to get the opportunity to do this now is just really incredible. And I am so proud of the amount of work that our faculty put in to make that happen. And our students who, at the beginning of the night, we were pretty rough. But by the end of the night, man, they were pros, ready to go and ready to head out into the field. It was incredible.
That's fantastic. Well, Shari, it gives me chills thinking about what the next generation is up to, the important work that you're doing, the importance of journalism, and the importance of the next generation of content creators. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. This was really fun.